Outbosses, save the date. On Monday, December 11th at 6:30 p.m., the Out Entrepreneur travels to Orlando, Florida for our very first live podcast event. The event amplifies the power of the Central Florida LGBTQ and ally business community. You can RSVP today by visiting www.outentrepreneur.com and look for the show notes from today's episode for registration details. I hope to celebrate your authentic selves in Orlando on Monday, December 11th. Hello, Out Entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 47 of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So on today's show, we have Genesis Fisher, who is a longtime friend of mine and a fellow Outboss, and she's joining us all the way from New York, New York. So Genesis, thanks for being on the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow Outbosses?
I'm ready, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so honored to be here.
Yes. Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And a little bit about Genesis. So she is the founder of Fisher Law Practice PC, which helps businesses and organizations keep talented employees and avoid costly lawsuits by addressing internal conflict before it gets out of control. Definitely awesome services. So FLP also helps people who have been arrested avoid jail time and keep their record clean. Genesis graduated from Smith College and New York University School of Law. And after law school, she worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center, very cool, before returning to New York to become a public defender. And Genesis spends her free time making industrial furniture and competing as a powerlifter, which is so cool. That's awesome. So to kick us off for the interview, Genesis, can you tell us just a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Sure. So I got into conflict resolution just kind of on a weird incident that happened. I was walking home one night from New Year's Eve, and two couples were getting into a fight in the middle of the street. I intervened. We did a mediation at that moment, and people went away grumbling, but there was no fight. And I just fell in love with the process of people actually talking through things and reaching some kind of agreement without having to get into a fight or without having to involve law enforcement. At that moment, I was like, well, how can I incorporate this into, the problems that I see? And one of the things that I noticed in places where I've worked was that there wasn't a lot of support for people who felt like they experienced sexual harassment or gender discrimination or racial discrimination, or honestly, even just had like an asshole boss. I mean, there was nothing that people were doing about that. They were just letting things fester, and eventually people would leave or sue. So that's how I started this business, because I want to be able to have my company help people at those forks in the road. So like when an issue happens, when an incident happens, but not to ignore it, but to actually bring in a team to do some one-on-one coaching, to do some mediation, to do some team facilitation if a team has been harmed by this, and to really repair things and support people so that they can do their job and stay where they are.
Yeah. I love that you found a talent in just kind of like the story that you shared, just kind of one night you saw a couple really struggling and you were successful and really de-escalating that and seeing that is actually such a valuable skill, especially in the world of law where we live in such a litigious society. People are so quick to sue or go to court or you get law enforcement involved. So I think what you're doing is so valuable, especially in this moment in time that we're in. And so, I'm curious right now, what is the one thing that has you most inspired about your business today?
I think the thing that inspires me most is that I can help people use their voice. And we know that everyone has a voice, but sometimes in the workplace, there can be repercussions. If we're talking to our coworkers, if we're talking to our supervisors, if we're talking to our boss, I like to be able to come in and kind of be an intermediary and to help people with that process, to be able to actually put out there how they're feeling and to get validated and support. And then also put out their ideas for how to improve things and to see those actually be put into good use.
Yeah, I think like what you're saying is in the work that you're doing is really empowering people to one, just find their voice, right? I think that for a lot of people, it's a scary thing to speak out, and the services that you're providing are just so valuable, and just kind of reminding people like, hey, here's your voice, like here's how to use it, and also just kind of that piece around conflict negotiation or just kind of de-escalation, these are skills that not everyone is taught or has the opportunity to practice, right? And so I just think that what you're doing is super, super valuable. I'm curious, you went to NYU, you worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center, just such an amazing organization. What was that moment for you where you were like, I want to start my own business? Usually like people start, at least people that I interview, for kind of one or two reasons. The first is that, they have this idea that they're purpose driven, they want to have a huge dent in the universe. And so they're starting this thing. And the other piece is that sometimes people feel like they're working for someone else, they're working on someone else's dream, and they kind of have to fit themselves into a culture that doesn't really value who they are. And so I'm just curious, which side of the coin did that land on for you and why?
I'm actually going to say I landed in the middle. So I was one of those coins that just rolls down the street for like half a block, and you're like, what side is it going to flip on? I'm not sure. But I would say about 4 or 5 years into being a public offender, I knew that I wanted to leave. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I spent a couple of years with a counselor. And we kind of went through all of my interests, and I applied to different jobs to see if something was a good fit. And so on the one end, it was going through that process and finding that, nothing was really quite fitting the experience that I wanted to have next. And then on the other end, it's that honestly, I got tired of feeling exploited. And, the thing about going to law school and being a lawyer and being a public defender and doing awesome work is that you do know that in the private market, that your labor is worth a lot more than what you're getting paid. And we actually, in New York, I worked for the Legal Aid Society. We get paid okay toward the top of public interest work. But at the same time, I knew that I was providing really great service for people, but I wasn't getting the respect and the compensation that, I felt like at that point that I was entitled to. I mean, after a while, I've been at law school now for 11 years. I'm almost 40. And I was also thinking about the future. At some point I want to be able to have a car and a house and things like that. And I didn't really see that future in what I was doing.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it was so powerful for you to say that you're just tired of being exploited, working in the public sector, for a nonprofit, doing really amazing work. And you saw an opportunity where there was this gap. There's other law firms out there potentially doing something that you're doing in a similar way, but they're not you. They don't have kind of your vision, your talent. And so, I'm curious, because you working at an organization like Legal Aid, it's a fairly progressive organization, yet, I'm sure there's things about the culture there that didn't really totally align with who you are. I'm curious, like in your own business right now, what's one thing that you do to try to create a more inclusive environment for either your clients or, potentially other people that you work with who just often feel excluded by a dominant workplace culture?
I think that my training before law school and as a public defender and even with conflict resolution, all of it together, usually for me, what it boils down to is being able to talk to people and listen to people and sit down with them in a very empathetic and respectful way and hear what's going on with them and talk through their problems and work with them to try to figure out solutions. So that is regardless of the person's race, gender identity, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Everyone, deserves respect. Honestly, demands respect. And that's one thing that I love about the work that I do is that I'm pretty confident that people who come in to my office, regardless of their background, feel pretty comfortable when they sit down with me. And right now, my team isn't very big. I have a part-time administrative assistant and now 2 interns, but they're just wonderful. And I feel really confident that anyone that comes in, and if they speak to anyone on my team, that they'll feel respected and comfortable.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about everyone really demands respect. And I think it's really clear, you kind of exude emotional intelligence. And I think just that trait as a leader in your own organization, the willingness to kind of hold space and listen to either your staff or your clients. I wish there was more of that in the world, because I think that can really help create a more inclusive environment of just allowing people to know that they're being listened to and that you're considering their perspective, their point of view in a way that really honors what they're saying. And that doesn't happen a lot in a world that's so noisy, right? I'd love to kind of shift a little bit and talk more about your LGBT identity and how that shows up in your work. Your business is relatively new. So if you could take us back, maybe in the first few days of starting the business or even now, like if you can recall a time where it was difficult for you to maybe talk about being LGBT in your business, was that a challenge for you? Did you consider how out you wanted to be? Was there a time where you really had to kind of pause before you may have corrected someone who may have assumed something about you, or maybe you were afraid to do that because you didn't want to lose the client? I'm just curious, have you encountered anything like that? And if you have, how did you work around it?
I don't know that I've encountered that since I started my business. I mean, me just physically, I think I just look gay. I'm always surprised when people don't think that I'm gay. I'm pretty gender nonconforming. I've been lucky to now have been out for, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. But what I will say is that how it's made a difference, I still do some criminal defense. Now I'm able to kind of cherry pick the cases that I want. And one community that I really like working with is the LGBT community. And I find that the clients that come in, I mean, you can tell that it's a stress relief just to even sit down and talk to me, because they don't have to explain things. They don't have to explain like how a gesture, like what could be considered a gay gesture, right? How that can affect a case. Whereas if they were with someone who is not familiar with the community, they might have to explain what that gesture means. So I do love helping people in my community that way, to be able to come in and not have to explain the code to the people that they're sitting across from. And I'll say personally, how it's come up for me in the past, just as a lawyer, is that occasionally I'll have a client who is kind of homophobic. And this was before I could pick my clients. And that was really challenging. And, I had a client who we got into like a pretty big argument in court, and he said some really awful things. And that was tough. But it's now that I have my own business, I'm in a little bit of a much better position, so that, in the screening process, I can keep from having to go through the same thing.
Yeah. I think like what you're saying, a number of other guests have also expressed since starting your own business and their businesses, it's really just being yourself, and that you find that you're attracting clients that you enjoy working with, right? And that in particular, I love what you're saying is that not only are you enjoying working with your clients, you're also attracting, fellow LGBT folks who really need representation and people that understand them, and who better than someone else from the rainbow family, right? To really kind of like just put people at ease, right? And I think that that's huge. And that in fact, that helps you build a thriving business, right? It's not necessarily a deficit. And, this show is all about empowerment. And so one of the things that I like to do is just kind of amplify some of the benefits of being an out boss. And I'd love for you to reflect on why, being an out boss is an asset to the work that you do. Like what are some of the immediate strengths that might come to mind when you think of the power of just being 100% out in the work that you do?
I mean, I think just going into the workplace and doing these workplace facilitations and coaching and mediation. I mean, some people are not out at work, and just seeing someone who is visibly out can be a tremendous relief. Just knowing that there are people who are available to speak with can be a relief. And when I do one-on-one work, people are able to actually fully go into their history in a way they may not have felt comfortable with someone else. So, I'm out. I'm I'm pretty clearly out, but I like it. I mean, that's just me. Yeah. And it's part of, when you do conflict resolution, the most important thing is authenticity. and I'm my authentic self. And I think that helps other people, no matter where they are, to be their authentic self too.
Yeah. I could see that in the field. You're saying conflict resolution, the number one trait is to be authentic, that's building trust and rapport. And I think that's huge. And, you were talking about being out for 25 years, it's clear you're comfortable in your skin, you're holding that space. And even, for colleagues that you might be working with or clients who aren't out, just to see you as a possibility model is, like you said, it's definitely a huge relief. And so we never really know like our full impact on the world, right? And that we live in. And yet these are kind of the small things that you're noticing. So, and I'm sure it's huge for the people that you interface with all the time. So considering, some of the challenges and the blessings of being an out boss, what do you want our listeners to really focus in on, Genesis, to make sure they take away, just to inspire them to be more authentic at work? So, these could be people just kind of thinking about getting started on their businesses. They might still be working for someone else. What are some takeaways that you want them to hone in on?
I really, I know we keep saying this, but just be yourself. It's just important. There's an existence value to just being yourself. Other people see it and they're inspired by it. I grew up in Kentucky. There weren't a lot of people in Kentucky that looked like me. Kentucky it's more diverse now, but it was not very diverse 20 years ago. And just coming to Brooklyn and just blending into a crowd was kind of amazing, because people were just themselves. And I literally did blend into a crowd, and it was awesome. And so if we can all just be ourselves and create this crowd that people are able to blend into, it's liberating. It really is.
I love that. So we're going to take just a very short sponsorship break right now. I think it's a good breaking point. And when we come back, we're going to have the opportunity to get to learn more about Genesis and ways to stay in touch with her business. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. Welcome back, Out Bosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Genesis a little better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn how to stay in touch with Genesis after today's conversation. So Genesis, are you ready for the quick fire questions?
I am.
Awesome. Okay. In one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
Ooh. It means to bring my dapper clothing style and wild ass hair and really, really, really loud laughter.
I love it. Just being you, right?
Yep.
And so what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I'm always reading books that are about improving my skills. So it's not, I don't know that I would call it a habit, but, well, I guess it is a habit. Almost every day, I try to spend at least a half an hour reading some type of book that helps me improve my skills.
Yeah. Leaders are readers, right? So it's just kind of getting your hands on some of those books that can give you some solutions that can get your business to another level faster, right? Like learning from other people's mistakes and hopefully not making the same.
Yes.
So you had mentioned before you have like an administrative staff. So I'm curious, like what's one thing that you readily delegate to them to stay focused on what you're good at in your business? Man,
some of these cold calls.
Yeah.
They just grate on me after a while, and I can't be as upbeat on the 10th call as I am on the first call.
Yep.
And also, I'm just thinking about like 1,000 other things I need to do, and calls I need to return to clients and things like that. That's definitely one of the things that I delegate. And I have this really awesome bubbly intern, and she's just so good at these calls.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, you know what you like doing and you know what is just not, it doesn't feel good. Right. And so if you have that support, it's so awesome. And then I also say this to people who are solopreneurs, like, just keep a list of like the things that you know that you love doing, that you're good at, and the things that one day, like, you understand the systems, you know how to make those calls, but one day you know that you can delegate those, right? And just keep that laundry list of the things you want to delegate one day. So you had mentioned that you read a lot. So I'm curious, like, can you share, a book or maybe a podcast that's contributed to your success as an outboss?
So this is probably not what you're going for, but I really like, so I do this reading for skills building, but I think what actually has helped me the most is fiction, because it takes my mind off of the work that I'm doing and allows me to refresh. And I love a lot of the YA science fiction. I'm just a nerd that way. And, if I'm reading Harry Potter for the 5th time or the Hunger Games for the 4th time or whatever new book, it allows me to just, like I said, refresh. And I'm just a better version of myself when I go back out there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Sometimes we do have to unplug, and it's not always about business 100% of the time, right? And so fiction is such a nice way to escape. And I love the young adult science fiction, right? Like, it's, I feel like there's more that can be said about the world that we live in sometimes in fiction than in the nonfiction that people tend to recommend. So a nice reminder of kind of some of that self-care that we have to do as bosses.
This is all really new for me. I've only had my business for about a year, and I actually never worked in the business sector before this. I'd only ever worked in nonprofits. So I would say maybe like 5 months ago, I was just putting all of my time into the business, marketing, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. And I thought it would help my business grow faster, but really it just made me miserable and made me a miserable person to be around. Mm-hmm. So like when I went to networking functions, I just wasn't very interesting because I wasn't doing anything other than my business. Yeah. So that experience helped me to realize that, no matter what, you have to have some kind of balance, because a balance actually does help your business. Yeah. Because it helps you when you come across other people, and it helps build that trust and that connection.
I love that you said that. It's hard when you get started, right? Because there's so much to do. And, especially like the first few years in your business, you're so excited about it. But you got to be careful, right? Because there is that you can get really close to the edge of burnout, or you can burn out, and it's right on for you to have enough self-awareness to kind of say, wait a second, there's something that's getting like muted here. Like, I'm not my full self, and you're able to kind of take a step back and kind of reintroduce some of those things that you love that aren't necessarily about your business, such as like reading fiction, right? Or travel or whatever it is, just to do those things that keep you interested in life and also interesting, right? So I think that's a great reminder. Okay, so 2 more questions for you, Genesis. The first is, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Follow your heart, follow your dream. I mean, we all have ideas that come from our experiences. And as Rainbow folk, we have sometimes different experiences, and those experiences lead to different types of ideas. And I definitely think that they should be explored to the fullest extent possible. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn a little bit more about your business?
Sure. So I have a website, fisherlawpractice.nyc.
Awesome. Cool. And we will definitely include that in the show notes, along with all of the other recommendations that you shared during our conversation. So Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses. Genesis, thank you so much for being a possibility model on the show and for sharing so much of your knowledge. It was awesome to connect with you here. And for our listeners, as a next step, definitely check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation, subscribe to the podcast, and consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.